And we haven't heard from Councillor Don't nor the other one.
Summer.
Mackinder. Great, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No. The minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of February. Can I sign them as a true and accurate record? Agreed.
Could I just mention, Chair, that there are two sets of minutes, because you remember at the end of the council meeting there was that very brief meeting to appoint you as chair and Johnny as so you've got two sets.
Okay, thank you very much. This one too.
Yeah, that's right. That's just the council meeting where you were appointed as chair.
Thank you. Item A4, the Elections Act. Pretty straightforward. I had a couple of questions. It's the report just outlines provision of the Elections Act which are relevant for local government elections. So does anyone have anything to that? I've got something I'd like to add. That seems relatively sensible. But the only ones I was wondering about, I didn't quite get. So what's the new two things? The political finance framework, having just signed my election expenses. So introduce further controls against ineligible foreign spending on electoral campaigning. I just wonder what it was referred to. Just wonder why. I mean, I know I don't need to know why, but I'm just interested.
Essentially, it's generally the thing most nations limit other nations, other citizens in other nations funding. So they can't vote in elections. So the issue is, can they finance campaigns?
Okay. And is it people who live abroad as well, or is it just third parties who might like to give a dollar? I don't know. So.
Well, I think it's both. I think it's both the issue of it's mainly the issue of third parties, but probably also precludes individuals, don't you?
Yeah. So third parties in the broader sense.
Yes, but so it's not people that not people who are masked by a company structure, but individuals as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting, about 98% of electors already have accepted forms of identification. I just wonder what you think the impact's likely to be on photographic identification on voting day. Are we likely to have long queues while we're going through each person? And
look, I think there'll be lots of there'll be an awful lot of publicity about you need to take ID.
Yeah.
And as the government says in its publicity around this, that actually this has been there's extremely different circumstances that create legitimacy for this, but it's been something that's been prevalent in Northern Ireland for some time. It's not really. I mean, so if you ask, people without driving licences for ID, I mean, there is going to be a voter card in councils for people that don't have driver identification or passports. To be able to get a voter card from their council, so it will involve us probably doing quite a lot of that. Because we have the highest number of overseas nationals, passports are overseas, probably driving licences are overseas as well, and so we're probably going to have to look at the voter card quite heavily. This will apply in by-elections even from now.
Well, I think the implementation date is from May 2023.
Yeah,
so it could if by-election before that.
Yeah, so by-election before then may not. This won't apply.
how will that roll over to postal?
Well, you see, there's another thing.
There's a
Posters,
different
isn't there? Go online now. That's what this is bringing in.
Yeah, there's signature identification online. So when you do postal vote identification, you're looking at their signature and their date of birth. They're not providing a photo, so it is a different identification process for postal votes than it's for voting in person at the ballot box.
It's an online system.
Yeah.
If I could just make that this is very much a framework, and a lot of details going to come in through regulations and then implementation through guidance from the Electoral Commission as well. So it is, these are the headlines. So and I think the programme for bringing in various sections spreads over between now and May 2023. So there's a lot more to come in terms of the detail.
Yeah, in previous times there's been piloting things, testing where they work or don't work so well. And so that essentially says all looking at 2024.
The road cleared.
There you are, road cleared. To May 24, which is potentially both the KZA and the January.
Where is the camera? So when we don't know when this actually comes in then?
Well, we think May 23 is when
May
it's
23.
scheduled to come in, but there's sort of, as Laverne's just said, there's some sort of staging posts on the way, bringing in things that make the whole thing feasible. For example, the switching from a supplementary vote for the Mayor for London
Yeah.
to a first past the post. The purchase, the procurement of the software system to do the electronic voting probably takes about a year, if not longer. And so the Great London Returning Officer will have to consider whether this is counted by hand rather than electronically, because it was infeasible to count it by hand when it was supplementary vote. Because
But it will be if it's just.
but it may be, but of course there's also the additional member system for the Great London. So there's got to be a lot of, and that involves 14 constituency GLA members plus 11 top-ups. I'm sure that probably could be voted by hand. But it's the additional member system. So it may be, I would say one of the earliest things is looking at, will the Mayor for London vote 2024 be conducted by electronic voting counting system, or will it be done by hand? And what if there's a general election which would be scheduled the same day? So that's the big issue for 2024, yes.
So actually this is really big, isn't it?
Yes, and the question about what's likely to be the impact of ID, well, it's not going to increase the voters. It will increase people's confidence that the vote. But actually, if anything, because the UK has been operated hitherto under a high trust. People come and say who they are and say where they live, and they're checked if it's at the ballot. If they do it by post, their signature is checked and their date of birth is checked. But if they come into the ballot box, just them saying their name and where they live, they're taken on trust. But they'll have to have an ID. It's likely then that there will be lots of publicity about that, because an awful lot of people won't have ID unless they're encouraged to do so. So the council needs to look at this voter card arrangement.
So you could have, in 2024, right? You could have a numerical system implemented in a new way, combined with a general election, combined with new.
GLA members.
Yeah. Wow.
There's only 3 different papers. That's 3 different systems.
This is
Sure,
something
fine.
that we really have to look at next year when all really go through all the regulations.
But I think
That's
the
what-
by-elections, as Laverne says, by-elections in the foreseeable future up until May 23 will be done conventionally as now. Unless they're hurried on.
Hopefully there won't be any by-elections before instance.
Yes.
You never know these days.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly?
Oh.
I got in by-election,
It's
so
only
there you go.
again.
No, I got in by-election, so I stand for that. Just in case, you never know. Thank you. Can I just have a quick
Yes, of
comment?
course.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the 5 minutes late traffic. although I said my apologies, but again, I thought I could make it, so
Yeah,
why
you
not?
did.
Why not? I'm really concerned about the photo ID. Also, nothing we could do about it. Photographic identification. However, we're responsible in Kensington and Chelsea, and I think our residents should get whatever we can give them support. For example, if someone born in the borough and then we have a certificate, whether passport of family or certificate, then we know that individual was born in the borough. We know the identification. Perhaps we've mentioned the ID card or the local government can create. Perhaps that could help individuals who may not be in a position financially to have passport or anything else. Is there something perhaps we can think about in the long term?
Yes,
Yes.
and I do feel that we could. The place to look here is actually in internationally, particularly Australia, where it's
Yeah.
compulsory voting.
Yeah.
And so they do an awful lot to encourage young people in particular to take out voter cards. There's much more car ownership amongst young people in Australia, but nonetheless, I think the experience of other nations that use ID and where there's compulsory voting, I think play well in terms of us just, in a sense, innovating something about voter card,
Yeah.
which is more than just a voter card. You know, it's a Kensington Chelsea Gold Ambassador card.
Something like that.
Something
Yeah.
that's got a bit of
Brand
cachet. about it.
Kensington.
It's got to have
Yes.
a bit of cachet for people to think that this merits. You know, I'm actually a citizen that's able
Yes.
to vote. So I think we can make something of that
Absolutely.
rather than just begrudgingly say, "Oh, well, we've produced something in the
Yeah.
event people don't have anything."
I think that would be something to stand out. Probably other local authorities would be in a position to follow us.
Yeah.
And the reason would be for those who this would be a generic for everyone, whether you're a millionaire or someone who's trying to make ends meet, will get a card from ID card from Kensington, and I think that would be Kensington and Chelsea. I think that would help everyone to be on an equal platform.
I was just going to add to your point about it costing anything. I think it says in 2.3 it's going to be free.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, for the voter card.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, it won't
No
be
one
free
would
to
be-
produce, much.
yeah.
But yeah, free, yeah,
Yeah.
of course, we'll be posting. But yeah, I think the government or local or anyone can do that. And I think it would be
But what you're saying, although it's free, and although it's in the framework, that we should boost it so it has a certain cachet about it, so people feel that they want to get it
absolutely.
in order to then use it to vote.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Although not such that there's a grey market in these cards. So alluring.
People start using them to go into clubs.
Yes, it will be club ID.
yeah, well, there you go. It's one of those things. I think we can think about the effect it
Yeah.
will have, but yeah, ultimately to have that card and it's automatically generated for anyone who's
Yeah.
of the age of
I think we
voting.
have to.
And
Well, we have to, under
yes,
the law,
it's-
so that's
it's
fine.
not- it's not something we get.
Mr. Fletcher, you said there's certain postmarks that we should watch out for if this runs to scale for the timescale to May next year. Can you tell us when those are a bit likely to be? Like the boundary review, you said that there'd be certain points that we have to reach before it goes through.
No, I
It
said that
automatically
it was basically the point that Vern was making, that there's certain stages that the government will have to go through.
Mm.
I just don't know what they are.
Oh, okay.
But it will be in each element of this, and they'll set it out sequentially, really. They'll say, if we do this, then it's in this order, such that by the time we get to May 23, everything will be in place statutorily through Parliament. I think
And we
that's-
will just be instructed to do
Yeah, we do.
regulated.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on it? No? Thank you. Then paper A5, which is about the Poplington and Thomas Huggett Apprenticeship Aid Fund Trust to vary its the trust stream objectives so that we can it can give money towards purchasing school uniforms and amending the eligibility criteria. And also, once we've sort of changed its objectives, delegate the approval of grants, school uniforms, clothing to the Executive Director of Children's Services. This was something that came up for those who weren't on the administration committee last time. It came up at the last administration committee, And actually, it was Monica Press who thought this would be a very good idea. She said, you've got all this money, but actually, people at the moment really need money for things like school uniform, but we couldn't use the trust to do it without altering the terms. So it's come back to the administration committee to say, this is a way, if we alter the terms and the objectives, this is a way that people can have access to these relatively small amounts of money, which will make a big difference to lots of families. So if anyone has any comments or questions, okay.
Yeah, no, I do. So I very much welcome the change, to look at reducing and supporting school uniforms and also delegating perhaps. I think it's a really good thing. The only thing I question is that we're talking about awarding 10,000 a year against an income of 6,700 a year. So that will be eating into the account balance every year, which on a rough calculation means that the reserve will disappear in 10 years' time. And I just wondered, is that a good thing? I mean, Mr. Pocklington's trust that eventually we're going to see it disappear if we maintain, obviously, awards above income.
If I could just clarify, I think that must refer to the fact that there's already some interest still unexpended from last year, because the trust can't award funding from the capital, it's only from the interest.
Okay,
So,
that
yeah.
answers my question. So if we're just funding out of income, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, thank you.
And I have a related question to that, which is it this committee's responsibility, or is there somewhere else in the council that would look at the actual investment return on it? Because it says interest, but obviously that's going to become very small, it'll probably be by inflation. So it's getting 3.3% at the moment. And whether we have I don't know whether we invested or whether it's just in an account somewhere.
I don't know the detail, but I think it is for this committee, so I think we'd need perhaps a more financial report. So
It's a simple suggestion. I don't know, again, don't know whether it works. Is whether we could ask our investment committee whether they just thought this was not to do it, but whether they look at whether this is an appropriate return, or is it can be managed along with some other funds so that it can get a bigger return.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be within the investment committee's terms of reference to manage the investment of these funds, but I take the point, it's getting the best advice so that these funds are managed in the best way. So I think there will need to be a report back from Children's finance team. So perhaps I could take that back for the next meeting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think in general, I think it's a good point to support, and as he mentioned before, and Levin has clarified for the income. And I think as Councillor Press mentioned earlier, and we've talked about this many times, I think it's a good initiative to support, and many youngsters in the borough will benefit. But again, yes, as colleague mentioned, it could also be good to inform the investment committee, but just so that they know what's happening. But I think this is the right committee to make the decision and probably move forward.
So, does everyone, would you agree with the recommendations in paragraph 7?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't believe there's any other business this evening. No? So I have the meeting closed. Thank you.
It was Mr. Pocklington anyway.
No, but he gave grants and money for various different areas around the country, so this was related.
Oh, see, so it wasn't like a local resident.
From looking back in the history, there are other public trusts involved.
The only other business is the search party country.